Hi, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground. Welcome to this week's episode of The Underground, a program that explores the gospel of Jesus Christ, the testimony of the biblical prophets, current events, and how all of these things relate to you and me. On this week's episode, we are joined by our friend Billy Ray. Billy he and his family have been working in northern Iraq for the past several years, and I had the opportunity and the blessing, along with a team of guys, earlier this year to visit with them and their team in northern Iraq, north of Erbil, up close to the border of Iran, to visit with the refugees and all that they're doing there. And so it's a blessing to have Billy with us this week. Billy, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Just introduce everyone to yourself. When exactly was it that you came to northern Iraq? And then talk about the events of the past year and a half with ISIS and how that really has sort of changed everything in terms of your work there.
Yeah, we've been living in the Middle East for about 13 years, in Iraq since 2008. Of course, initially our emphasis was around widows and orphans, as I worked with World Orphans. But as ISIS entered the scene back last summer, 2014, we began reaching out to the refugees and have now built about 5 camps where they dwell.
So let me ask you a question. What happened? Here you are in northern Iraq. Suddenly, you're there with your family, children, the whole deal. All of a sudden, the news comes that this radical group burst forth out of Syria. It's sweeping across Iraq. What was it like being on the ground at the time, watching the news unfold? How did you feel up there in northern Iraq?
Right. I mean, it was obviously disturbing. Very day that ISIS invaded Mosul, we were in Erbil picking up some new teammates. So the day that they arrived was the same day that ISIS was taking Mosul, which that was about 40 miles away from where we were from the Erbil airport. So that was obviously a little scary. Initially, we kind of prepared again our kind of exit strategy if we needed to take off at any time. But the most impacting thing that we felt was a immediate gas shortage. ISIS took over the Beji refinery, which is in the central part of Iraq, and suddenly we couldn't even drive. And so that kind of, obviously made us a little anxious, a little nervous. But we just felt like God wanted us there, and we weren't checking out anytime soon. And we also had great confidence in the Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, to defend their part of Kurdistan in northern Iraq.
A lot of folks here in the West, we're just watching the news, and the nature of the news is that if it bleeds, it leads, and it's all negative all the time, and here's why you should be afraid, and this sort of thing. But the reality is, driving up there, we were there. I was visiting with you in January. Northern Iraq, it's absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. I mean, it looks like something out of The Hobbit, the mountains and the greenery, and just, it really looked like, you were in parts of New Zealand. And so it's really not exactly what a lot of people picture. They say, well, you're in northern Iraq. Oh my gosh, aren't you afraid of getting beheaded on the internet any day? ISIS is only so many miles away. But the reality is there is a large section of northern Iraq there, as you said, that is, this is the region known as Kurdistan. So this is where the Kurds are. The Kurds are ethnically different than the Arabs, and they've always maintained a little bit of a slightly autonomous region, and they have the Peshmerga, which are guarding that whole region. And there really is quite a stable environment, particularly as you're going up into the mountains. So tell people a little bit about the reality there, sort of to get away from all of the negative stereotypes that people picture when they think Iraq?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things, just drawing from history, the no-fly zone that the U.S. implemented in 1991, along with its allies, that really enabled the Kurds to breathe. Saddam was exterminating them up to 180,000, even into the 90s. But that no-fly zone really gave them that respite to develop their own government, their own autonomy, and also began to build up their own defenses. So the Kurdish Peshmerga, the stats I've read, is about 70,000 standing army. And they basically, if you just, I just encourage everybody to go on Google Earth and just check it out, because the terrain makes it more easy to defend the Kurdistan region than in the plains where ISIS is. And if you've followed the news, you'll see that ISIS really has not made any headway at all in the Kurdish regions of northern Iraq. Their only successes in battle have really come from the plains. So once they get into the mountainous areas, there's no way. I mean, the Turkish army, which has long been trying to root out elements of Turkish or the PKK out of southeast Turkey, has been unable to do that for 40 years. So ISIS, being a completely small operation, if you compare it to the Turkish military, they're not going to be able to get into the Kurdish regions, I don't think, very easily. And like you said, Joel, it is beautiful. You came at a good time. In the wintertime, we have lots of rain, and in the mountains, we have mountains up to 12,000 feet that surround us. And that also gives you a sense of stability, also just a sense of isolation. We may be 75 miles as a crow flies from the front line, but on a realistic level, it's almost out of sight, out of mind. If it weren't for the Kurdish troops that we see lined up on the street each morning to get taken up to the front line. But without that visual picture every day, we'd almost forget. And of course, we do have lots of refugees as well that are filling our area. But we don't feel threatened particularly, and that's why I'm there with my wife and my 3 boys. I wouldn't be there if I felt, physically threatened. So
then, of course, you have this just massive, overwhelming influx of refugees that are pouring into the Erbil area, over into Dohuk, the Kurdish major cities of northern Iraq. And so you have, when we were there in Erbil, for instance, you just have this huge field with, I don't know how many people are living now in these sort of UN-built camps. And so what you've been doing, what your team has been doing, is basically funneling off small family units and tribal units, because the camps are filled with a mixture of, Sunnis and different, sects that are opposed to one another, different families and tribes that maybe there's a little bit of conflict in some of the larger camps. So you've been pulling off these sort of different units, some Yazidis, we were visiting with the Yazidis, and then you had some of the Shaba Kurds, which of course are the Shia Kurds. Most of the Kurds are Sunni. And so tell everyone how you've been doing this, how you've been building these smaller camps, and then explain the Refugee Initiative and what you're doing with that and what your goals are and so forth.
Yeah, my heart has just been gripped with not just the refugee crisis that we see unfolding right in front of us in Iraq, and there are about 3.5 million internally displaced people, plus 250,000 refugees out of Syria. So, close to 4 million people that are in the place they don't want to be. But not just that's overwhelming. But let's just step back and think about how many millions are in Jordan. There's a couple million in Turkey, and they're in Lebanon, and now they're taking the refugee highway to Europe. And so I've just been gripped and just wondering, is there a better way? We think about Jordan and Mafraq, the city in the north there on the Syrian border, that now it's the 3rd or 4th largest city in Jordan, is actually a tent city for refugees. And so these are kind of, stateless, hopeless people, disenfranchised youth, that what is their future going to be? If you grow up in an environment like that, what's going to happen? And the vision that God kind of gave me is, what if instead of being like in Mafraq, for example, that's like 900,000, it's about 100,000, people in one tent city. What if they were broken down into smaller groups and they had autonomy? What if there wasn't a fence all the way around and that the host community wasn't patrolling their every move? And there is a lot of trust in the Kurdish region that we have, because most of the people that we're dealing with are internally displaced. So we're working, with Iraqis, and the Kurdish people are so hospitable. But what we've been able to do is set up micro camps that have no more than 20 to 25 families. And then we set them apart from the other camps, and there's autonomy. They don't overwhelm the host community, and they also give us a better grip on their ability to make pathways back to an independent life. We're also maintaining just the normal hierarchy that they came from in the small village. So that's just maintained. It's like the village was over there, and we just move it over here. They used to be spread out in all these abandoned buildings all around town, or maybe they had a little bit of money to afford to pay rent for a couple months, but now they're out. So we're just kind of bringing them back together in their natural home units and village units, and seeing that as a really good model.
Yeah, and it was beautiful to see. I mean, for a lot of people who haven't been able to see this, putting in really nice bathroom facilities, just putting in as much as you can, a quality camp. They're sort of elevated off the ground a little bit with some, crushed stone, so they're not living in the mud, so to speak, because the winter there, it gets cold. It's down a little bit below 30 at night, and they're basically living in tents. And so to create a stable environment, as you said, of tribal units where everyone knows each other from the village that they had come from. And then beyond that, you guys are actually doing, how would you say it, occupational training, because here they are suddenly displaced, maybe hundreds of miles away from their former village or city that they had grown up in. And now the effort is to try to get them to reassimilate and establish a new life, because if ISIS isn't driven out anytime soon, and there doesn't seem to be any major pathways in that direction, they need to establish a new life. And so you guys are doing all of the practical things that they need, that any humanitarian organization would put their hands to the plow. And so talk about that a little bit as well.
You're right, Joel. I mean, we've been able to focus on vocational training is what we did the first 6 years in Iraq. So that's kind of come easy. But we've also seen the need for opening a school for the refugees. They totally lost last year. And so we started that late in the summer. We now have 150 kids in that refugee school. And so, it really is amazing that we run the gamut of, over here we're building septic tanks and running electrical lines and building homes. On the other side, you're hiring teachers to teach the refugee kids, as well as providing vocational training for the adults, and just giving those as many pathways as they can back to a place of independence. And this is kind of the key thing. I just felt God speaking to me is like, we got to give them dignity as best we can. And at every stage in our humanitarian efforts, we have to discourage dependency. And that means, respecting them and respecting their abilities to help themselves. In many cases, the refugees have been building their own camps, and we hire them right on the spot. Alongside of them, we'll hire a master craftsman or a master mason, master electrician. So they provide kind of the labor jobs there. And so they're involved in rebuilding their lives from the beginning.
Fantastic. I tell you what, Billy, let's go ahead, and you guys, as part of your ministry, you've created a little video. The overall project that we're talking about right now, you've called it the Refugee Initiative. And we're going to go ahead and just play this.
The
Refuge Initiative. Okay. So let me just start over again. Okay, fantastic, Billy. Yes, this is, I think this is right up the alley of what because so many people are asking, what can we do? What is it that we should be doing? And I think what you guys are doing is the whole package. So really the project, everything that you're talking about right now is you've coined it the Refuge Initiative. And let's go ahead and play. You've just got a little couple-minute promo video clip just sort of explaining what you guys are doing. Let's go ahead and run that, and we'll be right back.
In 2014, ISIS brought terror to Iraq. Millions of people have been displaced and have run for their very lives. There are massive camps that are overrun with people with sanitation issues, health concerns, both physical and emotional, and there's no one to care for the individual needs of each person. There has to be a better way. How can we better care for refugees? Well, this is how the Refuge Initiative is responding. Firstly, we build micro-camps, self-governed, allowing family groups to stay together in a village-style setting with home units, kitchens and bathrooms. Secondly, we provide holistic care. That includes trauma counselling, community support and spiritual care. And thirdly, we equip refugees with pathways back to independence, including education, vocational training and job creation. These are not your ordinary refugee camps. We are building communities of hope. Sponsor a refugee today and welcome someone home.
For this week's program, we are offering the Gospel in the Last Days bundle. This important resource bundle includes the following 6 resources. Joel's newest book, When a Jew Rules the World, What the Bible Really Says About Israel and the Plan of God. This powerful resource addresses all of the critical issues relating to Israel in the unfolding plan of God, exposes the errors of replacement theology, preterism, and the anti-Semitism that is now exploding across the earth. Second, you will receive the documentary film, Better Friends Than Mountains, a film about ISIS, the Kurdish people, and the gospel of Jesus Christ. This beautifully made film will inspire and move you to learn what the Lord is doing right now in one of the world's most active crisis zones. Finally, you will receive 4 copies of Dear Muslim Friend. This highly recommended book answers all of the primary objections to biblical faith commonly brought up by Muslims. Not only is this a critical book for all Christians, but it was specifically created to give away to Muslims. Together, these 6 items are valued at over $60, but when you purchase all 6 items at the discounted rate of only $50, you help support this ministry. Go to joelstrumpet.com and order the Gospel in the Last Days bundle.
Okay, welcome back. So just before the video, we're talking with Billy Ray. Let me ask you this question, Billy. Somebody's watching this right now. They're 24-year-old, single, and they say, I really would like to take a year of my life and give myself to what is going on, unfolding there. Are you looking for workers? Do you guys need help in a practical way, or is that just difficult because of the language barrier? What are some of the primary things that you guys need right now?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to encourage anyone with a heart to work in Northern Iraq, us, and get them in contact with other ministries there. That's definitely in order. We've been linking with so many different organizations in the process. So we definitely want to encourage anyone with a heart for the Middle East to come and to see how they can be a part.
Yeah, and there's obviously, dozens of different ministries that are doing things, but there's still definitely a need to be filled. So right now, as we're talking, the big issue in the news are the refugees that are pouring into Europe. And this is really gripping a lot of people. And so one of the things that I'm seeing, even among Christian commentary of the news, is people say ISIS is sending in thousands of sort of undercover agents. This is a huge pathway. This is the fall of Europe. There's going to be thousands of terrorists now in Europe and Germany and this sort of thing. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure that there are some terrorists among the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of refugees that are pouring in. On the other hand, we're Christians. Our primary call and mandate is to have a focus on the gospel. Our primary mandate, our primary calling is not self-preservation. And I know that this kind of can rub people the wrong way, but it rubbed Peter the wrong way when Jesus said, I'm going up to Jerusalem to be crucified. And he reacted and said, no, not so, Lord. And Jesus turned around and he said, you don't have the things of God in mind. You have the things of men. And he said, get behind me, Satan. And I see a lot of nationalistic, tribal, carnal reactions among a lot of Christians. The way that I'm looking at this right now is that it's happening. I mean, whether we like it or not, it's happening. There's no turning it back. And so I joked. I said, listen, Christians, it's time to say the serenity prayer and say, there's some things I can't change. Now give me the wisdom to pull the positive out of this and say, this is a tremendous opportunity for the gospel. These people are in need, they're broken, they're desperate, and a lot of them, by the way, many of them, obviously are Muslims. They have seen the true face of radical Islam. And there's a lot of people that are turned off to Islam right now. Their hearts are very open. So if you were just to, with your experience, to give some advice to the church in Europe, even to the church here in the United States, as we're seeing not nearly the number of influx of refugees, but we're seeing some. What is it that we should be focused on right now as we're seeing Syrian refugees coming maybe to our city or to our, nation? What would be the advice that you would give to Christians right now?
Joel, it's not easy. I mean, we all have that temptation to give in to self-preservation. And like you said, Peter, he could see an earthly kingdom is what he was looking for, wasn't it? And he knew that if Jesus was knocked out of that picture, there'd be no earthly kingdom for him. And he just didn't get it yet. And we just got to think, that's a great example to use. And then also, you could think about just the example of Judas. I mean, Jesus knew all things, yet he brought Judas into his inner sanctum, into the core of his disciples. If he wanted to preserve his life, he would have never done that. And we just need to get our minds kind of renewed that the point of our life here in this is not to live it to the full. The point is to give it away for someone else. We are disciples of him if we follow in his footsteps. And that was the life that Jesus led. And we have eternity to enjoy all of the benefits of life and, for eternity. Why not give it away now? Why not, have that opportunity to give those crowns to Jesus? This is the thing I remind myself of always when fear starts to crouch upon my heart. I was like, I want to be able to give some mighty crowns to my Lord and Savior, and that will take sacrifice. So, I mean, we don't want to end up in heaven and just be like, what do I have to give my Lord and Savior? There's nothing there. What did I do? And we just gotta, we just kind of, sometimes we just gotta say, this life is not for me. I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And the life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. This is the time for true believers to shine. And even shine in the face of our enemies or in the face of our persecutors, and to say, we love you in Jesus' name, and I'm going to serve you because Jesus served me, and he took the punishment of all my sin upon the cross and your sin too. And we need to just, we just kind of need to man up and say, we were made to die. We weren't made to just selfishly live out the rest of our lives. And we're not going to be naive. We're not going to be not just to let people take advantage of us. That's not honoring to them or to Jesus. But we are going to be purposefully sacrificial with everything that comes our way. And I just saw some videos last night of some of the Germans just clapping their hands when they would get off the bus or off the train, some of these refugees, and you could just see what an impact it made in their life. You think they've ever in their entire life been clapped or been cheered? I can tell you, in the Middle Eastern culture, they probably haven't. And not that it's bad, but just that self-sacrificing giving. I mean, there are pieces of the church still strong and alive in Europe. And whether, Europe would like to acknowledge it or not, part of their humanitarian heart that right now, it was paid for in blood by the martyrs of the church in the Protestant Reformation. They are, the reason they're humanitarian today is because of the church of yesteryear.
Exactly, that residual influence of Christian culture on Europe, even if in so many ways it's a post-Christian society, that residual impact of Christianity is obviously still there. Well, listen, Billy, we're coming up to all the time that we have for this week. I want to make sure that people get the information they need to connect with you. So what's the main website you want to direct people to?
Yeah, they can check out a new website we started called sponsorarefugee.com, or they can go to the refugeinitiative.org website as well to get information and to help us continue doing what we're doing.
All right. Yeah, so I just want to encourage everyone. This is a family. This is the real deal. I mean, they're really doing this stuff, really laying down their lives, walking with integrity, and they need your prayers, and there's no end to the amount of finances that they would put to good use if they had it. The opportunity is tremendous. The fields are white unto harvest. And maybe the Lord has called you to, join the work there in Iraq, or maybe the Lord's just called you to be faithful where you are and to give to what the Lord is doing in northern Iraq. So I just, on their behalf, covet your prayers and support for them. So, folks, that's all the time that we have for this week. I want to thank you so much for being with us. If you're in the United States, you're not immune from what's going on in the Middle East. There's a storm coming, no matter where you are, no matter where we are. And we as Christians are called to lay down our lives. As Billy quoted, we've been crucified with Christ. So it's not an issue of choosing to die. According to the scriptures, we've already died. And so let's choose to live as though we've already died and allow the lives that we live to be for Him and for His glory. And we won't regret it. You will not regret it at the last day. So thanks for being with us this week. Look forward to seeing you next week. I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground.
Wow.